When you choose silence, you make a deliberate and conscious decision to step away from the noise of the world, from the distractions, and from the chaos that often surrounds us. Silence, in its most powerful form, is a form of self-control. It's an act that allows you to regain control over your emotions and thoughts. The world often expects reactions, immediate, loud, and visible ones. But when you respond in silence, you are doing something extraordinary. You are stepping out of the cycle of constant interaction and choosing to redirect your energy inward. In doing so, you break the predictable patterns that others expect from you. The reason why silence speaks louder than words is because in a world full of noise, it is the one thing that demands attention. People are accustomed to conversations, to responses, to feedback, and to constant engagement. When you withhold words, especially in emotionally charged situations, you not only disarm the external conflict, but also create an opportunity for others to reflect on their own behavior. Your silence forces them to confront their actions, their words, and their assumptions about you. What you say or choose not to say becomes a mirror for them, reflecting their own thoughts and emotions. When you stop reacting to the things that once triggered negative feelings, you start to shift the balance of power in your relationships. It's not about proving a point or making someone feel guilty. Rather, it's about establishing a boundary. By refusing to engage in emotional battles or unnecessary drama, you demonstrate that your peace of mind is not for sale. People who are used to pulling strings or expecting certain reactions from you will begin to question why you are not responding as they anticipated. This is when they begin to second guess their assumptions about you, their perceptions of your willingness to entertain their negativity. And it's in this questioning that change can begin. Silence is not merely the absence of sound. It's a tool that communicates something deeply profound. It conveys strength. It shows that you are not afraid to stand alone, to be unapologetically yourself, and to walk away from situations that do not serve your highest good. Those who rely on constant communication often believe that being silent is a sign of weakness. But the truth is, it takes far more strength and courage to walk away without saying a word than it does to engage in a never-ending cycle of confrontation. By withdrawing from unnecessary conflict, you send the message that your peace is more valuable than any drama, any argument, or any toxic conversation. Silence also has a healing quality. In the absence of noise, we find clarity. When we choose not to respond immediately or impulsively, we give ourselves the space to process our thoughts and feelings. In moments of emotional turmoil, our first instinct might be to react, sometimes out of fear, other times out of anger or frustration. But when we choose silence, we stop the automatic reactions that lead to regret or escalation. It's in the pause, in the quiet moments, that we regain control over ourselves. We can choose to respond with wisdom, with understanding, or even with forgiveness. But all of this requires that initial space of silence. Furthermore, silence teaches us about emotional resilience. It challenges the instinct to chase validation or to seek approval from others. We often find ourselves caught up in situations where we feel compelled to justify our feelings, explain our actions, or clarify our intentions. But silence teaches us that we do not need anyone else's validation to feel worthy. We do not need to prove ourselves to anyone. By withdrawing from the need to explain ourselves, we release the unnecessary burden of seeking approval. We become more in tune with our own sense of self-worth, which is not dependent on external factors. In relationships, silence can be incredibly transformative. We live in a world where over-explanation and over-communication have become the norm. Yet this constant stream of information often leads to misunderstandings and unnecessary conflict. The act of disappearing without a word challenges this norm. It causes those around you to reconsider the meaning of your absence. And in that absence, they may begin to question their own actions or feelings. They are forced to confront the truth of the situation without the distractions of words. In the quiet, the truth has a way of surfacing, whether it's the truth of their own intentions or the realization that they have taken you for granted. Moreover, silence allows you to rediscover your inner peace. Often we let external circumstances dictate our emotional state, but silence returns control to you. It's a reminder that you are the one in charge of your emotional responses, and that no external force can disrupt your peace unless you allow it. By choosing silence, you signal to yourself that your emotional well-being is not negotiable. You are no longer at the mercy of other people's words, actions, or expectations. You become the gatekeeper of your own emotions, and silence becomes a protective shield that guards your inner peace from the chaos of the outside world. In essence, silence is not about withdrawal and defeat, but about retreating for strength. It is about recognizing that the power to change the course of a situation lies within you. And sometimes the most powerful way to influence change is through the refusal to engage. When you disappear without a word, you invite others to reflect, to question, and to reconsider their approach. What begins as an act of silence can transform into a profound message of strength, self-respect, and emotional mastery. Detachment is not an act of coldness or indifference. It is, in fact, one of the most powerful and liberating choices you can make for yourself. When you detach from situations or people that no longer serve your well-being, you are making a conscious decision to preserve your mental, emotional, and spiritual health. The beauty of detachment is that it allows you to step back from the drama, the negativity, and the emotional weight of relationships or circumstances that may be holding you down. It's about freeing yourself from the ties that bind you to people or situations that drain your energy, leaving you with more space for growth, healing, and positivity. The concept of detachment is often misunderstood. Many people see it as abandoning relationships or cutting off important connections, but this is not the essence of detachment. It's not about severing ties. Rather, it's about disengaging from the unhealthy emotional entanglements that can arise within those connections. Detachment is a form of self-respect. It's the ability to recognize when a relationship, situation, or environment is no longer contributing to your well-being and having the courage to step away from it. This act of distancing yourself from negative influences is an act of self-preservation and emotional intelligence. In our lives, we often get caught in the cycle of pleasing others or feeling responsible for their emotions. We take on burdens that are not our own, and we allow the actions or reactions of others to dictate our emotional state. When you begin to detach, you take a significant step in reclaiming your personal power. Detachment allows you to stop absorbing the negative energy of others. It gives you the clarity to see situations for what they truly are without being clouded by emotions or expectations. It helps you to understand that you are not responsible for the emotions of others, nor are you required to carry the weight of their unresolved issues. One of the greatest benefits of detachment is the ability to see things from a higher perspective. When you are emotionally attached to a person or situation, you often lose sight of the bigger picture. You may find yourself in the midst of drama or conflict, constantly reacting to the actions of others. Detaching from this emotional involvement gives you the space to step back and assess the situation with a clear mind. You begin to recognize that you are not the problem, nor are you the solution. You allow yourself to simply observe without becoming entangled in the chaos. In this state, you can make decisions from a place of wisdom rather than impulsive emotional reactions. Detachment also creates the room necessary for growth and healing. Often we cling to situations or relationships because we fear the unknown, or we are afraid of what might happen if we let go. But by holding on to unhealthy attachments, we prevent ourselves from moving forward. We become stuck in cycles of negative emotions, unresolved conflicts, and unfulfilled needs. Detaching gives us the opportunity to heal, to rediscover who we are without the influence of toxic patterns. It is in the freedom of detachment that we create space for new opportunities, healthier relationships, and positive experiences to enter our lives. The ability to detach is not an overnight process. It takes time and practice. It's about learning to trust yourself and your instincts. It's about understanding that you don't have to endure pain or discomfort for the sake of others. When you detach, you are choosing to put yourself first, to prioritize your mental and emotional well-being above the expectations or demands of others. It's about recognizing that you cannot pour from an empty cup, and that in order to help others or be there for them, you must first take care of yourself. Detachment is the act of choosing your peace, choosing your happiness, and choosing your growth, regardless of what others may expect from you. One of the key aspects of detachment is learning to let go of the need for control. Many of us hold on to situations, people, or outcomes because we believe that if we don't, things will fall apart. But the truth is, the more tightly we grip, the more we suffocate the possibility of change or transformation. Detachment teaches us to release the need to control everything and everyone around us. It reminds us that there are forces greater than ourselves at play. And sometimes the best thing we can do is trust the process and allow things to unfold as they are meant to. When you let go of control, you create the space for new experiences, new lessons, and new growth to enter your life. Detachment is also a form of emotional maturity. It's the ability to recognize when it's time to move on from relationships, habits, or situations that no longer serve you. It's understanding that not everything is meant to last forever, and that some things must end in order for new things to begin. This doesn't mean that you stop caring or stop loving. It simply means that you stop allowing the past to dictate your future. By detaching, you give yourself permission to evolve, to change, and to embrace new opportunities without the weight of old attachments holding you back. In relationships, detachment allows you to love and care for others without becoming enmeshed in their emotional struggles. It's about offering support without taking on their pain as your own. Detachment allows you to be there for others without losing yourself in the process. It's about creating healthy emotional boundaries where you can give without feeling drained or overwhelmed. In this way, detachment is not about withdrawal. It's about maintaining a healthy level of involvement that ensures you preserve your own sense of self. Ultimately, detachment is a tool for personal empowerment. It's about recognizing that you have the right to choose what affects you and what doesn't. Do what you need to do for you and make you. It's about taking back your power from situations and people that no longer contribute to your well-being. Detachment is not about isolation or rejection. It's about creating space for the things that truly matter to you and letting go of the things that weigh you down. By mastering the art of detachment, you open the door to a life filled with peace, clarity, and emotional freedom. Taking control of your emotions is one of the most empowering and transformative actions you can take in life. It's about recognizing that your emotional state is not a reflection of the circumstances around you, but a direct result of how you choose to respond to those circumstances. Too often we let external factors, other people, events, or situations dictate how we feel, allowing ourselves to be swept up in waves of anger, frustration, sadness, or anxiety. But when you learn to take control of your emotions, you stop allowing the outside world to hold dominion over your inner peace. You reclaim your power. The process of emotional mastery begins with understanding that emotions themselves are not inherently good or bad. They are simply signals. They are responses to situations, thoughts, or events that bring our attention to something important. Emotions can act as a form of communication, letting us know when something is aligned with our values or when something is out of balance. However, the key is in how we respond to those emotions. If we let them control us, they can dictate our actions in ways that are often unhelpful or destructive. But if we choose to observe them without getting swept away, we gain insight into ourselves and the situation at hand. It's in this space of awareness that we find control. When we are not in control of our emotions, we become reactive. A single comment or a passing remark can trigger an emotional storm, and suddenly we are caught up in a cycle of defensive or defensive reactions. We may lash out, withdraw, or make decisions out of impulsive feelings only to regret them later. This is where taking control comes into play. It's about slowing down the process and creating a gap between stimulus and response. By practicing mindfulness and self-awareness, we can start to observe our emotional reactions before they take over. This allows us to respond thoughtfully, with intention, rather than acting out of a knee-jerk emotional reaction. When you are in control of your emotions, you are no longer a slave to your feelings. You develop the ability to choose how you want to respond to any given situation, regardless of how difficult or intense it may seem. For example, instead of feeling anger rise in response to criticism, you can choose to acknowledge the emotion without letting it drive your actions. Instead of spiraling into fear when faced with uncertainty, you can take a step back and reframe the situation in a way that allows you to move forward with calm and clarity. This shift in perspective allows you to approach challenges with a level-headed, clear mind, enabling you to make decisions that are grounded in logic and rationality rather than driven by temporary emotional states. Taking control of your emotions also requires setting boundaries. Often we let others' emotions and actions affect us more than we should, especially in relationships. We feel responsible for how others feel, and as a result, we might suppress our own needs in order to maintain peace or avoid conflict. But when you take control of your emotions, you understand that you are not responsible for the feelings of others. While you can be compassionate and understanding, you also recognize that you must protect your own emotional well-being. Setting emotional boundaries means knowing when to say no, when to walk away from a toxic situation, and when to prioritize your own mental health over others' demands. This empowers you to engage with the world from a place of strength and self-respect, not out of fear of how others might react. An essential part of emotional control is understanding the concept of emotional triggers. These are the things, events, or people that elicit a strong emotional response in us, often without us realizing it. Emotional triggers can arise from past experiences, unresolved traumas, or deep-seated beliefs about ourselves or the world. When these triggers are activated, they can send us into an emotional tailspin, causing us to react impulsively or irrationally. Taking control of your emotions involves becoming aware of these triggers and learning how to manage them. By identifying what sets us off, we can work through these triggers and begin to disarm their power over us. Over time, this awareness helps us respond to situations from a place of inner peace rather than from a place of emotional reactivity. A key aspect of emotional control is the practice of self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to manage and modulate your emotional responses, especially in high stress or challenging situations. It's not about suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. Rather, it's about finding healthy ways to express and process them. This can involve practices like deep breathing, journaling, meditation, or simply taking a moment to pause before responding. By practicing self-regulation, you can prevent yourself from being consumed by overwhelming emotions and instead choose to respond in ways that align with your values and goals. Taking control of your emotions also helps you to develop greater resilience in the face of adversity. Life is filled with challenges, setbacks, and unexpected changes, and it's easy to feel defeated or discouraged when things don't go as planned. However, when you have emotional control, you can weather these storms with a sense of calm and clarity. Instead of allowing negative emotions like fear, frustration, or disappointment to derail you, you can acknowledge them, process them, and then move forward. You learn how to bounce back from setbacks, adapt to new circumstances, and keep moving toward your goals, even in the face of adversity. When you take control of your emotions, you also foster healthier relationships. Emotional control allows you to communicate more effectively, listen more attentively, and respond more thoughtfully. You are less likely to lash out in anger or frustration, and more likely to approach others with empathy, understanding, and respect. This creates a more harmonious and balanced dynamic in your relationships, whether with family, friends, or colleagues. As you take control of your own emotional responses, you set a positive example for others to follow, creating a ripple effect of emotional maturity and intelligence in your community. Ultimately, taking control of your emotions is about taking ownership of your life. It's about recognizing that you are in charge of your reactions and that no one has the power to dictate how you feel unless you allow it. When you take control of your emotions, you unlock a sense of freedom and inner strength. You become more self-awareness, more resilient, and more capable of navigating life's challenges with grace and poise. You realize that you are the creator of your emotional reality, and by choosing to take control, you can create a life that is defined by peace, empowerment, and emotional mastery. Silence is often underestimated in its power, especially in a world where noise is constant and everyone is trying to be heard. But silence isn't weakness, it's strategic. It's deliberate. It's one of the most potent responses you can ever give when someone expects a reaction. When you go silent, you interrupt the rhythm of interaction. You create space for the other person to reflect, to wonder, to question, and in that silence, you take back control. You remove their ability to predict your next move. You become unreadable, and that unreadability is power. In emotionally charged situations, the natural response is often to speak up, defend, explain, or retaliate. We want to be understood. We want to justify our pain. We want to prove our worth or express our disappointment. But every time we do that, especially to someone who has already shown they don't value our words, we hand over more of our energy, more of our peace, and more of our control. Silence changes that. Silence says, I don't owe you anything. Silence says, you can sit with what you've done without me guiding you through it. That pause in communication becomes the loudest message of all. When someone expects you to respond, especially after mistreating you, your silence forces them to confront themselves. They start to analyze, reflect, and replay the last interaction in their minds. They wonder what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and why you suddenly stopped speaking. The silence haunts them because they no longer have access to your emotions. You've closed the door they used to walk through without knocking. You've reclaimed the key. It forces them into a space of uncertainty, and people hate uncertainty. They fear the unknown because it reveals their own lack of control. Your silence becomes the mirror they can't escape. Silence is also a way of preserving your dignity. When you remain quiet, especially when someone is trying to provoke or manipulate you, you demonstrate strength. It shows that your peace matters more than being right. It shows that you've moved beyond the need to prove yourself. You're not begging to be heard anymore. You're not explaining your worth to someone who refused to recognize it when it mattered. That's real confidence. Knowing your value even when no one else acknowledges it. Silence helps you stand tall without saying a word. There's another layer to silence. Its ability to help you think clearly. And when you no longer engage in arguments, explanations, or back and forth conversations that go nowhere, your mind starts to detox. You begin to hear your own thoughts again. You remember what peace feels like. You start processing your emotions without the distortion of someone else's influence. That space of silence allows healing to take root. It helps you reflect on what truly matters, what you've tolerated, and what you're no longer willing to accept moving forward. And while you're silent, the other person begins to feel the absence. Your energy is no longer being poured into them. Your attention, which they once took for granted, is no longer available. And that vacuum begins to speak louder than any words could. It makes them question whether they misjudged your strength, whether they underestimated your ability to walk away, whether they lost something they thought would always be there. This is the quiet shift of power, and it doesn't require confrontation, just silence. Silence also protects your energy. Not everything deserves your attention, your reaction, or your explanation. The more you engage with people who refuse to listen, the more you drain yourself. Every conversation, every emotional outburst, every back and forth leaves you feeling depleted. But silence is the boundary. It's a line that says, I'm done giving you access to parts of me you didn't respect. You become more selective with your words, your presence, and your energy. And the more selective you become, the more powerful you feel. Some people think silence means you're weak, passive, or avoiding reality. But those are the people who depend on your reaction to feel in control. They need you to speak so they can twist your words. They need you to engage so they can manipulate the outcome. But silence robs them of that power. It's not avoidance. It's mastery. It's the decision to no longer participate in dynamics that do not honor your growth. It's the refusal to keep dancing to the same dysfunctional rhythm. And in that refusal, you elevate. Silence also teaches patience. It reminds you that not everything needs an immediate response. Sometimes the best reaction is no reaction. Let things unfold. Let time reveal the truth. Let your absence create the space for revelation. When you stop talking, you start observing more. You start noticing who reaches out, who falls silent, who shows remorse, and who pretends nothing happened. You learn more in silence than you ever could in conversation. People show their true colors not when you're speaking, but when you stop. In moments when emotions run high, silence gives you the pause you need to remain in control. It creates space for intentionality. You're no longer driven by impulse, but by clarity. You're no longer caught in loops of over-explaining, apologizing, or defending. You realize that your silence can't be misquoted. It can't be twisted or used against you. It's clean, it's powerful, and it's final. Not because you've given up, but because you've risen above the need to fight battles that don't lead anywhere. The ability to remain silent, especially when you have every reason to speak, is not suppression. It's elevation. It's emotional discipline. It's the quiet refusal to let someone else's chaos live rent-free in your mind. Silence becomes your sanctuary. It becomes the place where your soul resets, where your power is renewed, and where you rediscover yourself away from the noise of others' expectations. You don't need to announce your growth. You don't need to justify your absence. The silence does that for you. It becomes your message, your boundary, and your shield. And the ones who took you for granted, they'll hear it loud and clear. One of the most underrated strategies in reclaiming your peace and resetting your emotional balance is shifting the focus back onto yourself. It's so easy to get consumed with thoughts about other people, what they're doing, what they're thinking, why they treated you a certain way, whether they care, if they'll come back, or what their silence really means. That kind of mental noise eats away at your peace. It traps you in cycles of self-doubt, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion. But the moment you stop watching them and start watching yourself, everything begins to change. You see, your healing doesn't start when they apologize. It doesn't start when they acknowledge the hurt they caused. It doesn't even start when they finally understand what they did. It starts the moment you turn inward and decide that you've had enough of leaking energy over someone who doesn't value it. Watching them won't give you closure. Watching yourself will give you clarity. When you stop checking for signs and start checking in with yourself, you begin to take responsibility for your emotional space. That's when you start moving with purpose instead of pain. Focusing on yourself doesn't mean becoming selfish. It means becoming aware of how much you've neglected your own needs in the pursuit of understanding someone else. It means recognizing the ways you've sacrificed your own peace to maintain connections that only drained you. When you stop watching them, you begin to realize how often you abandoned yourself. You start asking different questions. Not why did they do this, but why did I stay? What did I believe about myself that made me tolerate that? These are the questions that lead to transformation. These are the questions that bring you back home to yourself. When you redirect your focus inward, your priorities shift. Instead of overanalyzing text messages or reading into someone's silence, you start paying attention to how you feel. You begin listening to the tension in your body, the ache in your chest, the weight in your mind. You start realizing that those signs were there all along. You were just too busy trying to make sense of someone else to hear yourself. You get in tune with your intuition again. You hear the quiet voice that's been whispering, you deserve better. And this time, you actually listen. This shift also allows you to reclaim your energy. Every time you check their social media, stalk their updates, replay old conversations in your head, or fantasize about scenarios that never happened, you're draining your emotional battery. You're giving life to something that already proved it was unworthy of your attention. But when you start watching yourself, you take that energy back. You invest it into things that elevate you, your health, your mindset, your purpose, your vision. Suddenly, the things you used to obsess over seem smaller. Not because they weren't painful, but because you've grown beyond them. And the truth is, people notice when your energy shifts. When you stop chasing, explaining, or reacting, they feel that absence. They notice when you're no longer available for the games. But the difference now is you don't care if they notice. You're not doing it for a reaction. You're doing it for your healing. You're no longer trying to manipulate outcomes or control perceptions. You're focused on building a life that feels good to you, even if no one else understands it. You no longer need their validation to feel whole. Focusing on yourself also helps you reset your standards. When you've been deeply hurt, it's easy to lower your expectations just to feel wanted again. But healing reminds you that your standards were never the problem. Your self-worth was just buried under someone else's mistreatment. As you pour into yourself, you remember who you are. You remember what you bring to the table. You no longer entertain people who offer breadcrumbs while you serve a feast. You stop making excuses for behavior that disrespects your spirit. You don't explain your boundaries, you enforce them. This journey inward isn't always glamorous. It's messy. It's raw. Some days it feels like you're losing everything. Other days it feels like you're finally free. But what's consistent is the growth. And that growth comes from doing the hard work, sitting with your feelings, unlearning toxic patterns, forgiving yourself for what you didn't know then, and committing to becoming the version of yourself who would never go through that again. It means putting yourself in rooms that reflect your value, not your wounds. As you watch yourself, you start to see the power in solitude, not loneliness. That space where you're not performing for anyone, where you're not proving anything, where you're not waiting for a text, an apology, or a return. You're just being, breathing, grounding yourself in the present, finding joy in the simple things. You begin to realize how much peace was always available to you. It just required your attention. This kind of focus brings clarity. You begin to identify what triggers your anxiety, what drains your spirit, and what brings you peace. You start building routines that nourish you. You eat better, think clearer, sleep deeper. You attract opportunities that align with your values because you're no longer operating from a place of lack. You're no longer trying to fill a void with people who aren't qualified to see you. You're full now, not because someone poured into you, but because you did the pouring. You became your own source. And when that happens, when you're truly focused on yourself, you stop being accessible to the things that used to break you. You don't need revenge. You don't need to be seen. You don't need to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. That's the freedom that comes when you stop watching them and start watching you. That's the foundation for real emotional strength. And it's the beginning of a life rooted in purpose, peace, and unwavering self-respect. The most transformative thing you can ever do after someone breaks your heart, disrespects your worth, or underestimates your value is to disappear without a word. Not as a tactic, not as revenge, but as a declaration that your peace, your healing, and your evolution are no longer up for discussion. When you leave quietly, without dramatic goodbyes or emotional outbursts, you shatter the expectations they had about you. People expect a scene. They expect closure that revolves around them. They expect you to need them one more time before you walk away. But when you don't give them any of that, when you remove yourself in complete silence, you create a vacuum that forces them to face a truth they weren't prepared for. You've changed. Your silent exit carries more weight than any final conversation ever could. Because it doesn't need to be explained. It speaks for itself. It says, I've seen enough. It says, I'm no longer asking for the bare minimum. It says, I've realized that continuing to speak is only robbing me of the clarity I've been trying to find. And the moment you walk away in silence, you return to yourself, you begin the real process of healing. You no longer waste energy trying to fix someone who doesn't see a problem with their behavior. You stop hoping they'll understand one day because you finally understand that your growth doesn't depend on their awareness. It only depends on your decision to detach. When you disappear without a word, you break a pattern. You disrupt the cycle. You stop dancing to the rhythm of dysfunction. You no longer play your part in the endless loop of confusion, pain, and reconciliation. And that silence, your disappearance, it becomes the loudest statement you've ever made. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect, because some exits don't need an audience. Some goodbyes don't need to be spoken. The door closes, and that's enough. There's dignity in choosing silence over performance. There's strength in knowing that your departure will echo longer than any argument ever could. And the impact you leave behind, it lingers. It unsettles. Not because you wanted to hurt them, but because you disrupted their ability to control the narrative. They no longer get to paint you as emotional, irrational, or clingy. You took away their favorite script. You became the one who slipped out of reach without a trace, and now they're left in the aftermath of their own decisions. That silence forces them to reflect, even if they never admit it. It makes them question everything. Were you really who they thought you were? Did they misjudge your strength? Did they lose something they'll never find again? That's the power of your quiet exit. But more importantly, disappearing without a word isn't about them, it's about you. It's about reclaiming the energy you used to give away too freely. It's about walking away without needing permission. It's about choosing yourself in a world that taught you to make everyone else comfortable. It's not avoidance, It's wisdom. You've seen what happens when you overstay in places your soul outgrew. You felt the exhaustion of trying to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. Now you choose the exit that heals you instead of the fight that drains you. And during that disappearance, something magical happens. You start rebuilding yourself piece by piece. You no longer wake up wondering what they're doing or how they feel about you. Instead, you wake up thinking about what you need, how to protect your peace, and how to show up for yourself in ways they never could. You stop checking your phone for their name. You stop needing the validation that used to keep you bound. You become more grounded, more focused, more whole. You don't need the noise anymore because you've created your own inner silence. And that's where true power lives. You also begin to realize how valuable your energy is. You understand that not everyone deserves access to you. That your time, your presence, your softness, your love, these are all gifts. And when you give them to the wrong people, they lose their worth. Disappearing teaches you boundaries in the most sacred way. It reminds you that being available to everyone only leaves you empty. So you become intentional. You become selective, not because you're bitter, but because you're finally awake. You see clearly now. You see who's for you and who's just for the benefits you bring. And the healing that comes during that silent season is quiet. It's slow, but it's real. You're no longer performing strength. You're embodying it. You're no longer pretending to be okay. You're actually becoming okay. You're not seeking revenge. You're seeking evolution. You're not checking if they regret losing you. You're busy making sure you never lose yourself again. That's the kind of transformation that doesn't need applause. It's felt. It's deep. It's permanent. In time, the person who thought your silence meant weakness will realize it was your power all along. They'll scroll through their messages and see the stillness where your name used to be. They'll sit in rooms where your energy once lit up the space. They'll hear songs, smell scents, pass places that remind them of you. And in those moments, they'll wonder what happened, why you stopped reaching out, why you let go so easily. But what they don't know is it wasn't easy at all. It was necessary. It was the only way to protect your spirit, to preserve your peace, to build a life where your heart is no longer a battlefield. So you disappear, not because you're running away, but because you're finally running toward yourself. You no longer need to explain your absence. You no longer need to prove your pain. The silence is enough. Your life is the evidence. Your growth is the response. And while they question everything, you be busy creating everything you once begged someone else to give you.